Right, thanks for coming. That's great, thank you. Right, thank you very much for coming this evening. I mean, hopefully your journey is not being too difficult to understand some of the roads are a bit troublesome. Certainly great to see you all here. I guess my first thing is to say I really come at this very much from a molecular level. I mean, I got involved in this because of my knowledge of chemistry. I've learnt about the river, so I'm very interested if people have insights that I haven't got here or things I've misunderstood, you can tell me. Just a quick couple of images up. I mean, that's how the blast furnace site used to look at from a drone. This is what it looked like a year later. And you can see the amount of steel work, the amount of sort of chemical containing things like this gas holder here. It's all got coal tar at the bottom of it. There's lots of chemistry around here. And just by the fact the ground looks black suggests it's not perhaps just normal soil. So we'll come back to that. The title's a bit long, but it's quite specific. We're talking about the lower T's, and we'll come back to that in a second. I've been working on this as part of the North East Marine Research Group, which brings me on to my sort of acknowledgements. We're really here partly because, largely because of the fact the North East Fishing Collective didn't give up. When all the crabs died off, and stand to the back of the room there, one of the key drivers of that. And that then joined up with things like the Multi-Council Crustacean Desk Collaborative Working Group who looked into this, called evidence, tried to get the government agencies to help them. I was disappointed personally by the government agencies, but I've been very impressed by what the council's been doing. And then Reclaim's RC, a local sort of environmental activist group, standing on beaches, pointing out the fact we're not happy with what's happened to our environment around here. And then really I need to acknowledge all the various people who've helped me. You'll hear some information from the Tees Estuary Seal Study, which is very good. And my other colleagues within this North East Marine Research Group, Universities of Durham, Hull, Newcastle, York, plus the Fishmonger Company that supported us, and Reclaim RC also part of that. And from 2022 to 2024, we have a specific group of us that used to spend every Monday for a couple of hours discussing the river and trying to understand where pollution could be coming from, what was going on. So I've distilled a lot of that, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I hope, at the end of this, I've got across, a partial picture of what the lower Tees looks like. The fact that sediments are actually contaminated, and you'll hopefully be happy to believe that. Much of this contamination is on small particles, so it's not just the bulk, it's actually on small bits. And sadly, those small bits are released back into the river during dredging. So it's not necessarily the stuff that's taken out to sea that's dumped that has the contamination in it, it's stuff that's released into the river. And that's damaging the ecology, to put it simply. It's often difficult to tell because bearing in mind this river was incredibly polluted. So if your baseline is 1960, there was nothing in the river. There's lots in the river now, and that's a really good story and it's great. However, how much could there be more if we got this right? And we've also got to say that, when things happen, and we've had several events, the crab die-off, continuing die-offs, and things like the seals having problems, that all suggest something's not right. And whereas some of these could be natural occurrences, you do have to start to add the dots together. We have a polluted river, and then we have these things happening. Basically what I'm going to tell you about is really all this lot. And I'll sort of skip over, I shouldn't skip over quite like that. There's the river, the crab die-off, and the seals, and that sets a context of why we're interested in this and why I've got concerns and why others have concerns. In order to understand what those concerns be, I'm going to tell you a bit about maintenance dredging, what sediment contamination is, some of the developments that go on, specifically Tees Works, which is this huge site I have a picture of the first time as part of it, that is a very contaminated area. And then some actual evidence of where dredging has actually caused contamination, and some concluding remarks. So, right, water pollution. I mean, we've all heard about sewage. The water companies are not doing a great job. I'm not going to be talking about sewage. I'm not even going to be talking about the agricultural runoff, which is another big issue with our rivers. I'm not going to be talking about industrial effluents directly, because most of what I'm talking about is historical contamination. However, what gets released by our industry, I'm going to be talking about contaminated sediments. There are other issues that we really haven't started to address, road runoff. I mean, I think we started to hear about particles from brakes and other things. All of those end up in our rivers, which isn't great. Now, the rivers are well monitored, or they are monitored. I mean, in the case of the Tees Estuary, a boat comes up once a month and it does spot measurements. So it literally dips a little bucket in, takes some water out and measures that. And that's once a month. So if I'm polluting it the day after, I'm not going to be seen. So I have concerns about that, but that's life. And all that primarily is towards health, my health, human health. So we're looking for things that would be damaging to us. However, all these sources are going to be stresses on the, or stresses to the marine flora and fauna. Whether it's sewage, whether it's eutrophication, they're all going to change. And then on top of this, we have this contaminated sediments. So, and I guess the other thing is that really that dominant stress may change over time. So it may be that dredging was no problem many years ago because you were killing everything off with cyanide. Now that cyanide is gone, possibly dredging is now a problem. And we really need to start doing more testing of water for nature. And probably that means some different ways of testing, not just measuring chemical concentrations, but looking at how the actual flora and fauna react to the environments that's there. So the river teas. The teas here, we've got river teas. What I didn't know is there's a thing called the littoral current, and it comes down here. So crabs that are going to be found here have actually been born somewhere up here, in Lindisfarne or wherever. They're little larvae, they float down this littoral current, they get carried down, they get to a certain size, is my simplification of it, and they think, the teas looks rather interesting, I'll go and stop there and I'll grow. So at some stage later they become big crabs, or we hope they do. So finding small crabs here means nothing in a way, because they may have just landed that day or the day before, and they just have a little bit of time to grow. It's the large crabs we really want to see. There's currents for north-south past Teesmouth. Anything we let out the river is then going into this bigger system, and will potentially affect what happens on the Dutch coast or even on the Danish coast, because all those chemicals are going to get mixed together. The disposal sites, because we're on a continental shelf, are just offshore here, so it's not like they're going to disappear. They're in a relatively contained volume. It's huge, but it's contained. So that's different to if you're Canada and you have huge great troughs off your coast where you can drop things to the bottom of and they're going down thousands of metres. Too much information aside, but the Tees is a coastal plains called. So basically the tide comes in, it will flood parts of this, it will flood here. And that's so simple, but reality what happens underneath is things like a sort of wedge. So when the water's coming in, it doesn't all go out, the actual tide comes in underneath the river current, which carries on flowing out. So you get some very interesting ways in which chemicals will get circulated, ways in which animals experience that chemical environment we've created. This intertidal zone, looking at it in a more positive way, is amazingly complex. And you've got this change, one day it's dry, 1 minute it's dry, then it's wet, different species can survive there, you get a lot of different species coming up. So it's biologically diverse. I would say it's sort of exciting, it's a really interesting place to be. There's a great book just come out about a guy wandering around a tidal region in India called Intertidal, and I'd recommend reading that. More lyrical than I'm going to be. So what we're talking about here, here's the Tees mouth. We've got down here, so this is what's now called Tees Works. There's a blast furnace, it's just there, this is when the blast furnace is still there. South Bank, so that's Tees Port, the big port here. South Bank is here, the Coat Works is just there, which I'll also talk about later. And then we're coming down here, and you can see Mills with the football stadium just there. And then we're down to the Transporter Bridge and to Stockton and so on. So a lot of what's happening is, this is the most tidal part of the river, water comes in, but actually the tide used to go beyond the barrage. So water isn't going to just flow straight out, neither is water going to flow in, it's going to be circulating. So if you release a chemical at a particular state of tide, it may go in one direction or it may go in another. So how long it takes for something to exit the river isn't necessarily going to just be a short period of time. Because looking at chemical concentration, which is what we want to do, it's strange where there's high chemical concentration. It doesn't necessarily make sense from the point of view, the release point is going to be here because it's that chemical. Why is it in a high concentration here? Presumably it's around the tides and this is the flow of water. So what it should look like, or what it would look like before we came along, is the Dudon estuary in Cumbria is quite a good example. It's not well defined where the sea starts and where the river ends. You've got this flow of water in there, and we used to have all that here. So back in 1791, Seal Sands was huge. Middlesbrough was a tiny little thing down here, and Brown Sands were huge. Those have basically gone. Some of the first things that happened was they took out the bends in the river, so the meanders, and you can still just about see these if you wander out there, you can see where the cats would have gone in, whether it would have gone. I mean, those may well have gone in their own way, but they were taken out for navigation purposes to make them commercially useful to us. 1906, so we're talking over 100 years ago, there were huge great blast furnaces right on the side, so that's where the new quays being built. There are other works going on there, so lots of industry, lots of contamination. This is now over 100 years ago. That material you're making, no doubt, with the best one in the world, you spill a bit of it. You use it really well. Now, actually, you weren't, so you were using the slag to reclaim land. So there's a lot of chemistry just going into the land to start with. They were already dredging, so this is a Tees Commissioner's dredger. It had buckets on it, so it's rather different to what's used now. But basically, they were dredging to keep channels open so they could keep things open. Because the river wants to flow in and out. That intertidal area, the idea of living. By the time you get to 1944, seal sands is pretty much still there, but brown sands we've now started to eat into, with industry having started to be put in there. If you go on to 1971, from my point of view, just how the land looks, brown sands has very much disappeared, seal sands has been eaten into already, T-sport has now been set up here, so that's not a natural feature, it's been set up and put in there, and that's all the land that's gone. At that stage, 71, this is because it was a government report then, the industry we've got around here is things like the big steelworks and so on, starting to come in. But what we haven't got yet is a big blast furnace. That was the next bit. And already there's very little of the land, the sort of intertidal zones left. So this is courtesy of Inca. It's a great diagram, but it takes a read. So basically only these yellow bits are still left. Everything else you can see there has gone. And that's why 90% of area has been lost. I mean, the word reclaim in itself sounds, and it is positive, it's great to make land, but there's been a cost to that, and the cost to that is to nature. We straightened out the river, hard boundaries once again mean that if you put a concrete wharf in the way, nature can't go across that, it's a boundary, it's stopping species from travelling. We've lost this land, then we take the land away, we then put heavy industry on it. That's, heavy industry is polluted, which has made the river even more unviable. And that's where we were in the 60s and 70s. That pollution has gone from being directly in the river, but it's left a legacy behind. And that legacy is the highly contaminated land we have left, and we should be treating that carefully. And then the highly contaminated river sediments. And there's two things to do here. One, ideally you sort of remove them, but otherwise you leave them alone, because they are not nice chemicals that are down there. Brand Sands is a fantastic place to walk across. It's fascinating at low tide, just what you can see, a bit of shipwreck there. But the amount of worms and casts and everything else that's going on there. You have to say, what would it be like if the water was a bit cleaner? Would you see more things there? And could I then produce a picture of if I looked at the Dudon estuary, I'd see quite different things. Nature wants to come back again, so Samfrey is forming basically a salt marsh up on North Gare. You've got the nuclear power station just over there, and you can see all the industry across the river, and then you've got all the industry down this way. We are trying to bring it back again, so it's great. This Tees Tidelands project is a multi-million-pound project which is bringing back quite a lot of nature. I mean, perhaps you've heard about seagrass and the oysters that the Tees River Trust are doing, that's part of this. The other thing is they're going to flood our larger areas of Greetham, so just beyond where the North Gare is. They're going to take the seawall away basically, let the sea back in. That's going to give you more flood resilience, and that's the primary reason for doing it. But it will help nature too. So we'll get these rich, interesting environments that aren't great for us, because if you try and walk through that, you'll get very wet, very muddy. But they're fantastic for nature. And they're also great for absorbing anything that might be in the river. So things like the seagrass will start to clean out some of the chemicals, and the oysters will even. Okay, so I'm here because of the crowd dial in 2021. And I'm not going to tell you a lot about this, but I just want to set the context and give you a bit of the history of what's been going on since. So basically between the 25th of September and the 5th of October, these dates are somewhat variable. There's actually a huge crowd dive. I mean, it wasn't like it was gradual. You were getting beaches absolutely covered in dead crab carcasses. And in parallel with this, the fishers were seeing that the crowd had just disappeared. There's quite gradual things. We've got a few one day and then a few the next day. They've built up in this big thing. Now, weather systems will have an effect on this. If the storm's particularly strong and bring it in. But it is surprising that, certainly to me, this doesn't look like, COVID or something, or bird flu, where you get a few dying off and you get lots more. It looks like there's been a mass dying in a very short period of time. There's been a great group of people, basically under North East Fishing Collective, who've been reporting these die-offs. So an awful lot of people report to the Environment Agency, and on the website, it says at the bottom, northeastfc.uk, you can find a list of the things that people have spotted, plus in response to the Environment Agency. And the basic response is that these are natural. Now, natural die-offs do happen, if you look, but one does start to say there seems to be an awful lot around here. Now, perhaps people have become more wary. I think we've got too many other, if it was a totally clean river and we had all these die-offs, you'd have to say, well, hang on, perhaps it is natural. But we haven't got a clean river, we've got these die-offs. We're sort of saying the river, it's okay to do what we're doing because we're not having die-offs. But we're having the die-offs and we're still doing what we're doing. And I'll sort of come back to that. Decreased near inshore crab stand, is that right? Or should I say no inshore crabs?
I'll give you an example. I had fished out 200 yards of trawl that's in at the weekend. There's no crab.
Nothing. And previously you've got hundreds.
You wouldn't shoot them where I shot them at lobster, which is just north of the trees now. You wouldn't have shot that many before because you would have been trapped out. You wouldn't want to damage them.
No, okay.
And I just to get a catch, balance of what it's like as any recovery.
So we've made a desert basically, haven't we? We've made a desert.
I had 3 fish, never had so little. Smallest catching fish in 3 years.
And I mean, the whole ecosystem is linked. So, because the crabs aren't there, the things that we eat, the crabs aren't there. And it's species specific. I mean, what happened in 2021, it didn't kill huge numbers of fish at the time. There weren't lots of fish floating around, I understand, or washed up on beaches, it was crabs. So, whatever it was quite specific to that. Okay, so where did it happen? Basically, the most concentration was around the Tees here, but it did go down the coast. And once again, that makes sense. You've got this literal flow that's going to come down here. This is the Environment Agency's data. So, things, for example, down here, they're saying there's confirmed deaths here. They haven't got any confirmed deaths here, they've only got reports. But basically, they're all down this coast, the crab's got, and that's inshore waters, not all species, and I've told you about crabs, yeah, great. I guess, once again, something I didn't know about, there are migratory lobsters. I never knew this. But they migrate and they're fish and they're fine, and those have been relatively unaffected. But even there, we're not sure the season is quite as long as it used to be. So are they also steering clear of here? Right. So basically, forget that one at the bottom right there. 2021, there was a lot of effort put into this joint agencies. They produced one nice report. Nobody was very happy with the conclusion that it was an algal bloom. So the wrong time of year, simultaneous die-offs, and even if it was an algal bloom, it would still be our fault because it would be nutrient enrichment. I mean, you don't get an algal bloom. It's not something that's reported. I'm not sure, certainly not often, but even ever off the tees, it has happened. 2022, then basically based on analysis that was done as part of this, it had shown that pyridine was detected in crabs. So Gary Caldwell up in Newcastle and others did a lot of work to show that pyridine was actually toxic to crabs. I mean, it is toxic to crab, it's not the most toxic thing in the world, but that's, and the simultaneous die-off, once again, would fit with a chemical. If you put cyanide into a room, you'll kill everybody at once. If you put a disease in, if I infect you with COVID, not everybody will go down at the same time. So, that bit fits. Pyridine's basically a volatile chemical, so, just as pyridine on its own, it's surprisingly good, of course. It's not so it hasn't, and it would require a large volume. But once again, it's only killed off one species. That species is bottom living. I've shown you how complex the water flow is, and we'll start to talk about silt and things like this, So we don't know. I mean, the Lendefra, because this basically, this Lendefra in 2024 developed a new test, and their test suggests there's no pyridine in crabs. Now, this would be definitively proof that there wasn't pyridine there, apart from the fact they missed out one crucial experiment. They haven't used the old test on the new test. So they've done a test on the new test on new crabs, and the new test on the old crabs that had been frozen and therefore could have lost a lot of pyridine or some other process could have happened. But what it needs doing is to repeat the old test on the new crabs to show the old test is really inaccurate. You know, it may well, you know, we don't know at that stage, it's tricky. But let's keep it on in mind. So 2023, the chief scientist of DEFRA took all together a number of experts, and basically they were said it was a novel, it was more, well the wording was it was likely as not to be a novel pathogen. Now that was very surprising because in 2021 CFAS, who were recognised, the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Agricultural Science, recognised to be world experts in novel pathogens, said there's no evidence of disease here whatsoever. And you know, once again, I certainly wouldn't expect a simultaneous die-off, and we do seem to assume that. And so, you know, where we've now got to, you know, that's also 100% mortality, which was surprising for a disease. A disease that 100% kills everybody isn't a great successful disease. Personally, I think we're now at the multiple causes stage, and we'll come back to that when we talk about the seeds. You know, I don't think we're going to die off without human action. So it may well be that there is a disease component to this, but it's not a novel pathogen. I suspect it will turn out to be something that's already there. But the crabs have been damaged by something. Anyway, seals. It's fantastic on the Tees. There are all sorts of places you can go and see the seas. Griefin Creek is really nice, just beyond Saltone. This is looking out, if you go down by the nuclear power station and look across to Seal Sound, you'll see them all lying out there. It's not so good. I mean, I went down to film this dredging here, and this is a video shot, this is a drone shot by Greco. But as you can see, here's one dredger which has a huge 40-ton bucket. It's incredible to watch. This is a more normal trailing suction causeway, and you know, the seals are meters, tens, 100 meters away from them, which must disturb their environment. Now, okay, you have to do that, you need to keep the channel fluid. So, but I mean, it's to say that having an effect is tricky. So there are two types of seals: grey seals and harbour seals. Grey seals don't breed in the Tees. I've got people who correct me if I'm going wrong, but grey seals don't breed in the Tees. Harbour seals, it's the only breeding population on this part of the coast. And they're born late June to early July. The maximum count last year was 22 pups. Next breeding colonies are miles and miles away, so that's the ones. And basically between August to October there were 23 harbour seal strandings between Northumberland and North Yorkshire. And sadly all of those seals died. So there's 22 seals that were born. Presumably when they were counting them they missed one. But you know, there weren't thousands of seals. There weren't even 50 seals. There were around about 20 something seals there. And it looks like now 16 of them had mouth rot, which is this horrible condition here. They're all underweight, below birth weight. But when you actually did quite a detailed analysis and looked at that bacteria, they're all slightly different. So it's a bit like us in cold sores. You know, we get cold sores. We've got bacteria around all the time, or virus around all the time, but when we're a bit weak, we get the infection from it. So they haven't all caught it off each other. It's not a new bacteria that's come along. Something was on them anyway because they were weak. They were mainly lean, some unweaned, and they all had high levels of this industrial chemical PCB. Now, PCBs concentrate in the mother. Sadly, the mother then expels these PCBs through her milk. So they get concentrated in milk. It's highly fatty, it dissolves the PCB, it goes into the seals. So the seals get a far higher load than the mothers had. So the mothers aren't necessarily killed by it. So they came up with some fairly damning conclusion. You know, basic pups are below weight, they're dying because of this low weight and the bacterial infections. And you know, they're likely to be caused by the PCBs, and that's because we're finding it inside them. Previous work has shown that PCBs are known to cause this basically suppression of growth. They're also, I suppose, shown to be immunosuppressed, which is why they get a mouth rot. You know, there may be other factors involved in there, so the other chemicals we're detecting in the teeth probably don't help. But we don't know that. But PCBs alone are enough to do it. I mean, I'll just put that up for a couple of seconds. It's fairly damning that you know we've got close to 100% of these seals dying off. So it's great to see them there, but this, you know, is just crazy. You know, they're a protected species normally, but I mean, Sharon was saying the grey seals aren't doing too much better.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, at the moment, I work with the British Divers Marine Rescue, and we're currently dealing with the pups from the grey seals. As we said, they're not born here, but they come into our area. We've lost a lot of the newborns just before December in the storms that we had that got separated from mum. But now I've been out, I'm out every day at the minute. We're getting grey seal pups now that we were classed as a teenager. They're already molting. Every single one, bar 3, we've had to put to sleep. They're born at 10 and 11 kilograms in weight. We're picking them up now as teens at nearly 4 months old, and we're picking them up at 15 and 16 kilograms. The skin and bone, there's nothing on them at all, absolutely nothing. And what we're finding now is because they are so underweight and so dehydrated, we're finding that they're now getting a lot of respiratory illnesses. Picked one up at Red Pie yesterday, could not get its breath in any way, shape or form. So they're so unhealthy, it is unbelievable. They should literally be double the weight that we're picking up at the minute. They're in a really sad way at the moment.
Can I just ask a question about seabirds? So, I believe that turns green is estuaries
Yes,
on the north side.
I'm unaware of that, and there is a bit on the south as well, I think.
That's right, yeah. I mean, has there been any, I mean, and obviously things like terns, which are ground nesting birds, they're really affected by predators or disturbance. But is there any sort of...
I haven't looked into that. I mean, I think you could do,
Okay.
our team numbers kept we looked at that. I haven't looked. I mean, there is just so much going on. I mean,
absolutely.
and there is so little data quite often. It's fantastic, you know, British Marine Divers, you know, the data they provide and so on. But a lot of this stuff, you think the data should be there, but we don't know what it each looked like before the crowd went off in a way, because we weren't photographing, we weren't counting.
No.
But you're right, terns and birds, the terns should be well done. I mean, they have protected zones there. So I'm going to go through now quite a bit of stuff on what might be causing this. Sediment contamination, I've talked about sediments. I mean, diagram is what it is, but I mean, basically every single way that you get inside there. You know, we've got, you know, what we all understand is runoff, you know, mine sewer outlets, but just runoff, but certainly, you know, you've got a factory here, oil on the ground, lots of water, that ends up in the river. You know, historically then it starts to end up in this sediment down here, gets trapped. You know, you spill something into the river here, a lot of it will be trapped in the sediment, it's left there for the future. But equally, what we've got the land I've talked about here that's polluted, as that leaks into the river, it comes into the sediment. So that sediment, and in a way, when it's in the river, it's going to go out in due course. And that's what would be picked up by the monthly surveys. But, you know, in terms of the sediment itself, a lot of these chemicals are active at very low concentrations. So I just wanted a quick visual demo. So absorption. Basically, we often think about absorbing things. So you put a sponge down, you squeeze it, it sucks up water. That's absorbing the water inside it. So if this was my sponge, I could get as much of this weight or volume of material, I could suck in how much. So what's important is how much volume I've got. What's different with these organic chemicals is they absorb. They won't go inside this because it's either a solid mineral or because they don't like it. They don't like being in water, so they stick to the surface of our mineral. Now, if our mineral is just like that, I can only get, you know, those sides, this side, this side. But as soon as that gets to be smaller, then, you know, I end up, I mean, it's a bit silly to say, but you can sort of see the fine layer of things there. So I've at least increased the amount of material I could have on those particles by a factor of 5. And that's why absorption of these organic chemicals, because they aren't inside the materials in terms of minerals. Now, organic chemicals that come downstream could be inside something organic. So if you've got a bit of you know, a bit of the moor that's come down the river, it will have organic chemicals trapped within it, and that's absorption. But things that have been released into the river will be trapped on the sand or the silt that's there. So that area is quite important, because we look at when we're studying sediments, what you have to do is you have to take a kilogram of sediment, you measure how much chemical is in that whole kilogram. You're not splitting it into different particle sizes. So it may be that 800 grams is big particles that have virtually no contamination on it, and the 1 micron particles have the rest of the contamination on because they're the other 20%. And that gets to be quite important. So if you look down here, basically this is a sample that was done in 2023 3 for the maintenance dredge. So fairly normal, you take a sample here, you take it from the one before, wherever. So that's what they're going to dig, and they want to do that to say that they can then do the next set of dredging for the next part of their 10-year licence. At this end, it's mainly silt, small particles, and that's where you've got a large area. Up at this end, it's mainly sand, so you've got more large particles and small area. So if you look at it, basically, samples down here often have a higher contamination level, and that's shown up here. So sure enough, down here I can see higher contamination. And it looks like it's sort of cleaner down towards this end. But if you then say, well actually, if I look at the fraction of that, I can do the particle size, so I know what fraction is below 1 micron. I can then back calculate, and all that matters here is just this high. So here we've got one sample that's toxic and horrible. This one coming up here above our level that we said is the level at which we won't let anything happen. But here, in that 1 micron fraction, if it gets separated and is treated as different material, the whole lot are toxic. And that's why we can fool ourselves with some of these tests. You've got to be measuring the right thing in the right way. And I think at the moment that's not being done. By measuring it this way and basically fine, or not so good, that's an exception, we're okay for most of it. The reality is more like this, and I'll come back to why we should think about that. Which takes us on to maintenance dredging. River Tees, channel, boats have got to go up and down. In the middle there is a deeper channel that the deeper boats can go through, so that has to be kept deep. You come in every once in a while, and you don't dig it out with a digger, but you basically have a suction thing that sucks it out, and you clear the channel. So that you've got to do that to keep the navigation going. And with the T's, that happens right the way down here, these little numbered boxes here. And it's been dredged for over 100 years. And so it's okay, we've been doing it for 100 years, there's been no problems, so we can carry on doing it. And that's what the land applications read. They say that this is a well-known practice, therefore it should be able to continue. And that might be the case, but on the other hand, if you're making the river cleaner in every other way, perhaps this is now, and I think that's the case, this is now the risk that's now causing us problems. The licences are for up to 2.5 million tonnes, for example, from the River Tees along that whole length. They don't normally, they haven't been for the last many years putting out that much material out to sea. But to get some idea that 2 million cubic metres, for example, if they got to that amount, 1 million cubic metres is what? A million cubic metres is basically 100 metres by 100 metres by 100 metres. 100 metres by 100 metres is a hectare, so 2.5 acres. Put another 100 metres on top of that, and you've got like nine 30-storey buildings, which is a lot of material. And that's what's necessary to keep the river clear. I mean, the sand's been washed in, the silt's been washed out, you want to use it, so you've got to move that material. It's disposed of 3 miles offshore, so off here, which is this tin of Tees Bay inner. Tees Bay outer is used for capital dredging, which I'll pass on a bit later. So we've got this idea we're moving huge amounts of material. If a small amount of that is toxic, and as a chemist who used to try and understand what a powder was and took many, many samples, on that whole length, the sample I showed you there only had 12 samples. Here they're taking only 25 samples were taken to grant this first licence. Now, part of that licence was granted on the fact they'd been doing it before, so it was still okay. But only 25 samples to remove 2 million tonnes a year feels to me a bit less. They do extra sampling every 3 years to get as part of conditions of their licences. It's done by PD Ports, so the Statutory Harbour Authority. So as a company, they have responsibility for all these areas marked in here. To suit the point, they have their own police force, for example. They're responsible for the health of people coming on shore and so on. And that's, one of their duties is this business of enabling navigation. So for all the other people, Able UK or Dawson's who have wharfs here, it's PD Port's responsibility under law to make sure that they can access their port, their docks, their quays, the only thing they can't do is actually dump the material at sea, so they have to get a marine licence. If they could dump it, if they were not dumping it to sea, we wouldn't know what's going out there. So they have to go together, the government agency, marine management organisation, and say we want to dump so many material at Tees A, and this is the chemical contamination. And there's a conversation that goes on saying, you need to provide us with this many samples. And it's, I forget, one per 200,000 cubic metres or something like that. So it's a very, a kilogram of material out of 200,000 tonnes is not very much. How's it done? And this is key in here. So basically you have a vacuum cleaner, a trailer suction hopper dredger, the material is sucked up here, and then it's squirted into this this hopper here, and that hopper fills. Now if you drop, so this is sort of an example. Here's our hopper. I've done my first bit of dredging, I've dropped it into there, there's the big material, it's settled. The rest of the materials, you can see that was done at about, it's been still since 4 o'clock this afternoon, and still there are particles in there. It's clear water, it came out of a clear stream. If I shake it up, then that's probably more what it would be like for the sort of minutes. And if we watch that, that's what's going on. So those small particles are staying suspended. And you can see that here floating down. This is the port nest, one of their dredgers, just off Hartlepool, because it's the best film of the thing, actually, operation. This is all the small particles being released behind its activity, and as you can see, they're staying suspended, still visible at the surface. They're going to stay suspended for a lot longer than they'll disappear on the surface. And that material, is the more contaminated of the material that's there, just for these particular chemicals. Other chemicals won't necessarily follow this, but these hydrophobic materials, which are the PCBs, sorry Stan, yeah.
Can I just put one thing to like, beautiful footage there, but as you just finish all that dredging, you're passing on clear. And some lovely sands, you 300 yards inside. And we're going fighting from day one. It's a bathing beach, it's full of kids in the summer. And you get that dredge there, passing you, going in the port and out the port, 300 yards, and we're spewing that toxic filth. And nobody's interested.
Well, no, this is just the overflow. So, if they didn't overflow, if they didn't overflow, they'd have to go out to sea a lot more often. So I would say they shouldn't be overflowing until they can prove it's clean. But that would mean they'd have to go out to sea more often, which means they're using more fuel. And all these things come at a cost and a compromise. Dredger is perfect, and I'll show you a curve in a second. So, I think probably more than 10% is resuspended, and that is contaminants then released. The disposal site only gets 90%. This is from Peace Drone, which is the best footage of a dredger in operation, as it shows the hopper as well as the rest of it. This was today, so at 8 o'clock this morning the dredger is set off. And it's great, you can go on my shipping, and you can watch them, and you can record a nice little film of the two of them, and they do a bit of sort of dancing around each other. So that's just outside Teesport, just near to South Bank, just basically off Paddy's Hollow.
What do they do this? What's every day?
It's 6 days a year for roughly 10 hours. Six days a week for roughly 10 hours. I know. 6 days a week. They will always have 2 dredgers out. And that depends. It depends how much they need to dredge. They don't dredge any more than they need to because it costs them. And the material, if you are in Southampton, you operate with zero overflow because it's a closed basin. So any silt you release in Southampton ends up at the bottom. So there's no point in your dredging. Here, that material you see released off the Hartlepool will go out. And if we go to the next curve,
This maintenance dredging changed material over the years. You're showing this now, but you've also said that they've been dredging for 100 years.
yeah.
Obviously not with this kind of dredging for 100 years. So is the depth of the channel being changed, or
There are some small structure. A lot of it you could. TD ports would say nothing's changed. I think you could pick on it. The method of dredging, I think with a bucket dredger, you didn't have the same overflow situation you have because the stuff was falling out of the buckets on the way up.
yeah.
So it didn't have the same sort of release. And the other thing I think is this business, the river, back in 1906, the river was full of coal tar, phenol, cyanide. It didn't matter what you were dropping. I think now, and also there weren't PCBs in the river at that stage. There are now PCBs because in the 50s, 60s we put them in the river.
Which the PCBs have been banned for a lot of years. So surely that PCB load must be reducing year on year as you move that.
It is, yeah. The bulk is reducing, the small size part isn't reducing at the same rate as the bulk is. So presumably there are, a lot of the measurements, what we would love to do is go out on one of these dredges, and it's even difficult to do the measurement, because you've got the overflow coming, that's washing the particles. If I catch the it's not easy to do.
I would just anticipate that the sediment will be getting cleaner. It will be lagging behind what industry's doing, but as you move it out, year on year, there's less going into it. So in theory, it should be getting...
Unless you created, and I would argue cheeseworks, we're going to come on to now, is part of that.
I would agree with that, so that's why I was asking
Yeah,
whether the maintenance rating has changed.
The maintenance dredging hasn't changed, and I mean, I think the maintenance dredging isn't the primary problem, but it may be the vector by which the material is being released. So, and we'll come to UKD Orca in a second. How many minutes have I got here?
Well, it's 8:15.
Okay, right. So, right, these works we talked on, basically reclaim land, seal works, co-government, metal recovery, landfills. It's really not a great place. There has been, here there was 140 years of coke making. Coal tar, one of the products of coke, it contains all the nasty chemicals you really want to steer clear of. And with the best will in the world, thousands of tons were dealt with here. There were 1,000 tons left here when the factory shut down. That material has got to seep into the ground. And there are well-known historic cases where it has. If you go to Chesterfield, there's a housing development called The Avenue, that's built on coke works. And they cooked 1 million tons of earth to remove all the coal tar. St Anthony's gas works up in Newcastle, they've remediated it 3 times, and only now they managed to actually make it so it's safe. The cancer causing coke is horrible. So blast furnaces there, coke ovens, and this is now where the South Bank Quay's down, and that whole area, is really questionable. I think, as I said, this sort of providential approach, so basically, we're looking at a small risk, it's not going to happen, so we're not going to worry about it too much. Whereas, for our house insurance, we don't take that approach. The house might burn down, I'm going to find my and get insured for it. But, dealing with all these risks would actually cost. People would disagree with this, but, remediation would be cleaning up properly. They make it safe, but the historic contaminants are still left underneath the surface that's being removed. And also there are other areas they're not developing which are highly contaminated, which are likely to be seeping into the areas they've cleaned up. So, I'm terribly afraid that a lot of our money won't be used very effectively. Well, it's nice of it, isn't it? But it is that why it hasn't so clearly. It's a whole story around this. So groundwater into river, this is once again up in Chesterfield, this is what it was like beforehand. It was a tiny stream, you could see the coal cars coming up, that's a brick there. The Tees is a deep river, it's opaque, you're not going to see whatever happening down there, but there's no reason to suspect it's not. The Environment Agency has done a whole lot on these materials and has recommended ways of what you should do with it. That's not been followed at Tees works. Now, maybe there are very good reasons for this, I can't get it out of planning applications, I feel concerned. And that's where I'm coming from this. This is what it looks like. It's a highly complicated area. There are 1,000 tons of material there. You've got this gas holder here. There's a coke main coming along here, which once again is full of pyrophobic material, so it has to be dealt with very carefully. What you draw is you draw yourself a site conceptual map. Say pollution here, what's the problem? It's going to flow to the river. This is a huge distance, I'm not going to have to worry about it. When I talked to, I drew a picture to be provocative and sent this to somebody who's an expert on this area, and basically, he came back, my conclusion was this, that it was all wrong. I sent him a picture that was missing this continuous line there, and he said, draw a continuous line. So, there is likely to be this coal tar is likely to be spread all across this site. Why wouldn't it be? It's been used for that long for these purposes. The red thing is just showing how material is coming out, because not all the organic chemicals are going to come out at once, they're going to sit there. And these take hundreds of years to move because they're dense. So things, for example, they'll get stuck in this leggy, this little pocket down here, because they're the densest thing. Until water comes along and either just washes over the surface or the ground's disturbed. So they've dug out 8 meters here. As long as somebody doesn't go down 8 meters, they won't see it, but so it's not flooding. There was a big argument that, well, it couldn't have been, I don't know if you saw this at the time, it was said it couldn't be Tees works, we haven't started doing any dredging. It's nothing to do with us. But, actually, there have been an awful lot of things going on here. And the last thing that I think was probably pretty important was this explosive blowdown. So if you watch the picture of the film on the right, go for it. These things were still sat by. So this gas holder was sat just here when they blew this up.
Which actually wrapped around windows now.
Yeah, and you can see there's that, one pipe cracks, these are a bit corroded, they're a bit rusted, one pipe cracks, You know, I think you don't even need this sort of conspiracy theory, somebody knew it. Just the ground's not great. I've shaken this ground up. It had contamination in it. We then have a crowd die off, you know, the following week. No connection, you know. He wants to show you the whole film. So T's works are very proud of that. And, they do the ground, no question of that. You know, I showed you what that for. I mean, Stan and his colleagues saw the EKD order and warned him. The PD ports had a problem with their two dredges. They got somebody else in to do it. It's a different dredger working a different way. I mean, it was working 24/7. So Dave, in terms of, you know, this 24/7, is that enough to have made a difference? I don't know. If you're just on a tipping point where, you know, you're just below the level of Stokesley, and by working 24/7, you don't get enough time to disperse. You're going through all the tide cycles. I mean, lots of rivers you can only dredge on certain tides. That's not the case with the Tees. As you can see, they're all working all day. It doesn't matter where the tide is. So, you know, and then the question is what was being dredged? You know, were they picking up stuff that had been blown out from Tees works? The dredging was happening here, so our literal current is coming down here. We're dredging here, and everything dies down this way. So this is just the sort of GPS traces showing where the boat was each time every few minutes, and then how it goes out to the deposition site, which is out at the TGA. Okay, so what I've talked about now is supposition on my part to some extent. You know, I think it's all good physics, it's all good chemistry. There is no question. You know, organic molecules will absorb onto big areas. They'll go for the biggest area they've got. What I don't know is exactly what those materials are. So there's some materials that are in there differently, but I've got traces in the river that looks like it's the same material all the way up and down. So, you know, this is only a documented case. For the South Bank Quay, they had to dredge highly contaminated area. It had to be exploded from disposal at sea. There wasn't for any minutes around it, but it did require sediment sampling before and after. So here we are, South Bank here. The coat works I was talking about is just over here. That's T-Sport. So this particular, all this material is going to be removed. This was the bank that was going to be removed because they had to take a lot of borehole samples along here. And this was the area in the river that was supposed to be so contaminated. But it was based on one borehole measurement. They decided to exclude this area here. And then they took some samples before and after just around the area to see what was happening to the slate. And once again, you know, basically up is bad, down is good. Beforehand, you know, there was material there. It's not, you know, absolutely clean. You know, there is a history behind it. Now, it may be that before it would have been a bit higher, but then basically after they'd done their clean dredge, you know, it was all over the place. Now, they only looked around that area, so in the middle of the channel, the material would have been picked up by PD ports innocently, you know, no fault of their own. They would have picked up any further contamination and potentially, you know, taken it out to the disposal site or spread it around. But they have cleaned it up, you know, it's gone back to being roughly the same level. But this is happening. With the best, that was a clean dredge. It was a different technology, but it was trying to do as clean as possible. So, you know, my concern is, you know, we're not, and this is, sorry, coming back to this, there is potentially 1,500 dredger days occur between each sampling. So, you know, it's a lot of time happening before you do any more sampling. You know, in a way, because the T's work developments happened when they did, we have quite a lot of samples around either side. So we can see what's happening in the river. I mean, one thing you see is that on the South Bank there is some very clean silt, because they put down clean sand, clean earth from the Woodsmith terminal, and presumably a lot of that just washed out into the river. So to sum up, hopefully, I would like some ideal next steps. You know, I think we've got to measure more, but that's true of, you know, rivers, it's true of sewage, it's true of everything. We just don't have the data, and, you know, without that, it's really difficult. But I mean, in this case, you know, people are making a profit out of this, and they should be the people who are, you know, paying for a lot of this. And we've got to adopt a precautionary dredger operation. You know, you can't overflow unless you can show that the overflow material is clean. And, you know, there is a whole process beside that. And I think, you know, I don't understand why the Tees, you know, the Thames, for example, you're only allowed to dredge on certain tides. The Solent, you're only allowed to dredge on certain tides. Why is the Tees, you know, okay to dredge whenever? And some of the answer is, well, we've always been doing like that. It's never been a problem, and therefore it's okay. And, you know, I'm unhappy with that. You know, hopefully you're all convinced that the T7 is contaminated. You know, it's been worse in the past, but it's not great now. You know, much contamination on the small particles. Those small particles come out into the river during dredging. My battery's obviously about to run out. It's telling me something. The releasing contaminated silts is damaging the river estuaries, and you know, dredging methods need to change. So I've talked about the North East Marine Research Group. I mean, today there was a couple of MSc students out on North Gare doing some sampling. Because all we're trying to see is things like, can we see when certain events happen in the river? Can we see when the blowdown was? Or can we see when there was a dredging happening or something changed? There is a lot of data on the Marine Management Organisation. We're continuing to go through that, thinking of different ways to interpret it. I mean, having been a college scientist for years and years, it only occurred to me relatively latterly that I really should be trying to see if there's a particle size effect, and sure enough there was. If you read the planning applications, it will say that basically all the PCBs are on organic material. There is no correlation with organic material. There is a strong correlation with the surface area. So it points to the fact this isn't the mechanism that they're suggesting, that it is all caught up in the organic. You know, we're trying to find new things we can publish to actually increase this. And also increasing our engagement with agencies and governments, and that has become a bit easier in the last 9 months, but we'll see how much that continues. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'll leave you with that sort of vision, and thank you very much for any questions.
How much has there been a significant change since the government has changed?
I mean, there aren't as many people in these agencies as there used to be. But I mean, to be fair, you know, PB Ports, as a statutory harbour authority, they're a public body, even though they're a private company.
Right.
So I send in freedom of information requests to them, and they basically reply and send me the information.
Right.
Obviously, I've got to guess what question we should be asking. So,
Right. Yeah.
one thing I missed out of here was the overflow curve. So every time I send a dredger out, they will know when it starts to overflow. I've asked for those curves, and I think they should provide them to me. I've only been there 4 weeks, so it's 3 weeks and ticking. So hopefully I'll get those. And then if I find they're operating at zero overflow, which they're obviously not, but you know, if you were dredging for gravel, for example, you might be operating at 40% overflow. You want all the sand to go out and you keep the gravel. But they're dredging to clean, so they'll be operating.
You've also got hatch and so on, about less helpful.
I haven't really, I mean, I haven't, we had a couple of meetings with Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council, planners around Tees Works.
Because I've only read about this in the Eye.
Yeah.
In the Eye, how shipping houses in every edition. So.
I mean, I think it's been done quick and cheap. And you know, I don't understand, I don't understand why the whole site had to be levelled in one go. There is no, surely you should have cleaned up the sandbank, you had an application for that. You should have then used some of the money generated from selling the land to people to then pay for the next bit. Why do we not, I mean, and you know, if you look on my website, I mean, there's a particular bit I said, you know, is this when it all went wrong? And there was a letter sent to the Environment Agency, Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council, saying you should do all the decontamination before you do any demolition. The decontamination was only finished in 2024, the demolition started in 2021. So, you know, there was a disconnect there, and that didn't help. I mean, 2 people died on site, and that shouldn't happen in this day and age, you know. I don't, you know, it's just not good. And I mean, they still don't know, there's still, the poor family is still trying to find out what happened, so it's very difficult. But I mean, it's a whole other story around Tees Works, and I think the reason why it's in here is just that that is a major potential source of contamination.
I've got a question over there, Simon.
Thank you, sorry. Yes.
So we'll shorten our little bit of meeting because I've picked out a few key points. So
Thank you,
if
Karen, that's
questions,
great.
then sort of keep them coming.
David, yes.
Yeah, I just wondered that, I mean, obviously, Teesport is still being constructed.
Tees Works as opposed to Teesport. Teesport is Tees Works, yeah.
And are you still getting the same problem, or is there been a change in the way in which they are looking at doing capital dredging there?
Well, they're not doing any, and they haven't got any, well, we don't know the second phase. I mean, Stan, the second phase isn't yet scheduled, is it? Or?
No, in the planning process, possibly something is, if I can just give a second, I don't sound more of that, so I was at CDA, I know that was something wrong. But the front door, so I thought channel, to this day, the rocks are still, you think they're getting power washed. They die off just to kill crabs, kill every bit of like one down moss, worms, cockles, and everything.
I'm not going to a bird watcher, right?
Yeah.
But you have lots of seabirds, terns and
Yeah.
gulls and kittiwakes, all feeding offshore at certain times. So there must be something out there for them to be feeding.
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes, if it was that bad, you know, the black white gill moss were very on the spats, where the people that come fishing away, they'll go for the hooks. Just not very fun. But to this day, nothing will still go on the beach.
So T's works, I mean, the next big thing will be the net zero Teesside, which is obviously in a different place. There is a 4 kilometre pipeline going to be put out from Brown Sands, Northumbria's waters plant out to sea rather than build a retreatment plant. So that once again is going to be a big disturbance to the seabed. I think all of these things we need to be very precautionary with. And there are features you would see other places in the world, other places in the UK, like silt curtains, so you basically dredge inside a closed area, so basically the silt drops down where it was. As I said, zero overflow if you're a trailer suction hopper dredger, which we don't seem to employ on the Tees. I guess, quickly, I mean, it might take a while to slip through, but yeah, so this is basically the CFAS, so this is the Centre for Environment, Fisheries, Agriculture Science. They haven't got the right levels for these materials called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Horrible things chemical carbons are. You know, if you look at, basically it's not a problem in the southeast. They are a problem if you change the thing up here. All of our ports would have to shut because the dredgings that have already happened wouldn't have been safe. And you know, that's the sort of situation. Similarly around Cardiff, once again, steel and so on. So it's the standards by which we're doing it, and we're not, there is a real tension here. You know, the ports have to keep going. We want things to come in and out. But it's that little bit of extra money that can make it be done safely. You know, dumping it all at sea. Other countries don't dump 90% of material at sea. They take 90% to land and only dump a small bit. Canada has this concept of dispersal and I forget what they call it, but storage dredging. The storage stuff goes far further out to sea and gets dumped into a deep trench. The dispersal stuff gets dumped offshore because it's clean and they want it to be washed around. We have, you know, all our stuff goes out to relatively close by, and that's going to be washed around in the sea as well.
Thank you.
Simon, Barry's got a question.
Sorry, Barry, yeah.
Perhaps it's a bit naive on my part, but one would sort of believe that the Environment Agency was looking after our interests as far as some of these issues was concerned. Is that the case or not the case?
The system, I mean, we got the chief previous scientist of the Environment Agency came to see us up in Newcastle with Gary Caldwell, and he said, right, okay, well, where's the biological oxygen demand for this river at this date? We haven't got it. Yes, you know, just look on the head, no, it's not measured anymore. So we really have cut down what's being measured. I think, you know, if you know, the water sewage situation, we're not, you know, the regulations favour development. In 2016, there was a big change that things needed to favour development. And you know, this government is talking about the same sort of thing. And you know, there are some in Litchfields and Hosking, big planning agencies, Marine in one case and Land are very good at writing applications, and it basically says, you know, this is the national planning framework. It says we should be allowed to build a wharf for these reasons. If you object to this wharf, we will basically bring up this point and we'll show that you were wrong. So, and then the way it's worded, I mean, this is historical one. I find I couldn't have done that scientifically. So because the last measurement I did was this, the current measurement is okay, and that is just so. I struggle. And I mean, you know, I think some of the people who are more active than me, you know, they stop responding. The agencies stop responding. I mean, you know, David, I guess, you know, your council committee. I was really impressed with local councillors. You know, I was not impressed. The agency didn't seem to be responding. Now, if we delegated it to the local councils to be responsible, then these agencies should be responsible to them. You know,
despite, but the thing is what is shown, that even if they're not doing these tests and things like that, the wildlife, I would say you've got this extinction of crabs in 21, but then you've got this stuff, and the seals were a top predator.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of that, all the pubs. So at the end, you will have your, even if you're not getting, you'll be having your evidence that something's going wrong, because there's undoubtedly, if things continue, it does appear that all the things you talk about suggest it's going to happen again. You're going to find it being shown in wildlife.
But I mean, if the answer that comes back is it's a novel pathogen and you can't do anything about it, you know, Stan, you had a letter sent in to object to one application, and the response came back was this rejection is invalid because the independent panel said that it wasn't caused by dredging. He wasn't talking about it.
The top bottom for the NMO to issue a dredging licence, dumping at sea is supposed to be last resort, so we asked every agency what other resorts they considered. Didn't get an answer because they hadn't. I think the worst upset wrote was Ouchin, when we asked him, and once his eyeballs went back in his head, because there was a company at Middlesbrough that dealt with all the sediment and cleaned it up. It just wasn't interested. But, you know, you say the seal is the apex predator.
Well, it's
Yeah, so the PCBs with that eye, the machine was having difficulty to do the readings on the seal. The starfish were washing up at Redcar and Salt with an eye in the PCBs. So they're not really apex
They
predators.
have to be parameters in the 60 at the end of the day, it generally is still shown top parameters because they all
No, but I'm saying so, how can we get starfish if there's anything untoward? We'll eat an eye in PCB.
Are there any other questions? Yes?
When you dump on land, maybe it's somebody else's problem, for the groundwater.
We need to treat it properly. So I mean, yeah, you do. That's why it's not dumped on land, because you have to treat it.
Yeah.
So the material that came out of that excluded dredge I showed you has been dumped on land. I mean, I hope it's been well. There are ways to do it. I mean, you know, what happened in Chesterfield is they literally cooked the material, so they burnt off. Now that's not a very clean way, a great way to do it. The other way is you put it in a regular hole and you bioremediate it. So you encourage the right things there to eat up the chemicals. But it takes time. I mean, you have to devote acres to, years. And that is, if you use that land for something else and, you don't get to see instead, why not don't get to see? Yeah, that's about, I mean, a lot of it does come down to money. I mean, I think the same is true for, the political arguments about cheese works, it comes down to money. But it has real consequences. I mean, there's real consequences for the quality of jobs that will be produced, for the environment we have around us. I mean, one of the articles I have on the website is basically comparing us to Bilbao. I mean, Bilbao got the Guggenheim Museum. We get carbon capture and storage. It's just lack of vision, or an ability to make a quick profit. I don't know.
One last question from Hillary. You mentioned your website several times. Do you just want
Yes,
to
North East, yeah. So they are contactable on that, and if you have a look on the website, it's not wonderfully tidy, but hopefully you'll find some interesting bits of articles there. It's really been a working thing, so I haven't finished all the things, but it has a number of suggestions as to what's going on, and links back to primary bits of information. This presentation will be up on there in due course as well. And I've tried to keep too many links on things as well. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, obviously from what you've said, the Tees estuary, the Tees port is not an example of best practice in the management of historical and current contamination. There are other areas around our coastline, Runcorn and around Merseyside and around Southampton or Newport and the Bristol Channel. Where is there or do we have an example of best practice?
I think we have many different environments. So I've looked at the Mersey, and it's surprising actually contamination is quite limited. The Tees is that particular sort of shape of estuary, the particular depth of it, that I think a lot more material has been concentrated in there, and we haven't seen the dilution that's been shown in other areas. The solent is amazingly clean. I mean, I have arguments with professors from down in Portsmouth complaining about what's being done down there, and they're complaining about 100th of what we're seeing up here. And this is baseline. Their baseline is absolutely relatively clean. Our baseline is incredibly dirty, and now we're a little bit cleaner. And that's what we're judged against. And that, as I showed you, all those red dots up in the northeast, it just isn't great. Best practice, I think you look to the Netherlands. where they take most of the material on shore. The US, where the US Corps of Engineers is responsible for most of this, and they have a lot of thoughts about how they do it. I mean, it may not last, but no, but they think it's a different approach. I mean, we split all these agencies down. You know, the CFAS, you've got the environment, so CFAS is the Centre for they're the people who basically give the scientific opinion. The Marine Management Organisation decide whether you get a licence. Then you've got DEFRA at the top of this, so when DEFRA didn't like the report that was coming out from the Environment Agency, they stepped in to do their own independent panel. It's just not a way to get things done cleanly.
So, thanks very much, Sam. Is there anything that you want us to do, and that's something Climate Action Group likes to do, is to actually think, well, we've heard all of that, what can we do? Is there anything we can do as individuals? I mean, obviously there's people in the room who are part of different groups, and there's a lot of, it sounds like there's a
No,
lot
I mean,
going on,
totally.
but,
We're really keen, anybody who has any knowledge around this area, to get in touch. And I mean, I think equally, to point out people I should be in touch with. I mean, we haven't reached out to the Village Trust as much as we probably could do and should do, so that's what we want to do.
We know about action. What are the new there's a new problem MPs. I mean, it must be something that they've been at least aware of.
Well, I mean, so Andy McDonald, maybe some more MPs.
They've been supported from day one.
Right.
Both councils, but the Labour councils that I it wasn't political. And our new MP promised a meeting, as did Mr Starmer when he came to see us. We've been promised a meeting with the Environment Secretary and no, I was in the plan stage, we're waiting for a report coming back from
So I mean, I think make sure you follow this. Please tell your MP you want your river to be clean. When we need to engage with the various different people who are doing this, the agencies and the companies. I mean, PD Ports, can I come and do this lecture to you? Because I think it's not helping. It's threatening your business mechanism at the moment. And this is something we need to look into.
You could contact mine, of course, let's say MP for South.
Yes, okay, yeah.
In a certain route you would contact him.
Okay, right. Well, so Anna Tully, I've chatted this about as well, for example. And I mean, the panel you had, whatever party they were, they all seemed to very much understand that this was an issue. And I mean, North Yorkshire, as a North Yorkshire resident, I was impressed that our councillors were there and they were supporting you, because it's our coast too. North Yorkshire, there's this split up between boundaries, trying to get into different planning systems in different areas. It's the same thing, but I mean, my son's up in Newcastle, their system, you can't, basically, things disappear once they're a certain age, whereas at least Red Current Clean, everything's still there, which is brilliant. Why is it? Anyway, sorry, but yeah, MPs, please watch this, and anybody who would like to get involved, please get in touch. Contact details there, and we're very happy to keep you informed.